Thanks for joining us at Right On Replicas, where we're proud to bring you the best scale model kit reviews on the planet. This review is brought to you in part by Rogers Hobby Center in Saginaw, Michigan, where the fun begins. This review covers the Foose 1965 Chevy Impala kit. It's a 125 scale kit from Revell, number 85-4190. In 65, Chevy gave the Impala a complete redesign with a full perimeter frame for a smoother ride, and it was the first of the fourth generation and had many improvements over previous models. Now, a familiar name in the area of automotive design and customizing, Chip Foose cut his teeth with Boyd Coddington and then branched out on his own and designed several famous customized automobiles. Now you can see the Foose treatment on both the inside and outside of this model kit. It was released by Monogram in 1996, that's the 65 Impala, and it's had various versions, at least 4 or 5. This kit contains 142 parts molded in white, chrome, clear, and transparent red with vinyl tires and water slide decals. When you're done, the model measures about 8.5 inches long, 3 inches wide, and 2.25 inches high. I hear Newt tapping on the glass. Looks like he's got a question. He's our program director. Come on in, Newt. What is it?
Those wheels look great. Were they standard equipment on this car?
Oh no, those are customized wheels. In fact, I think they were designed just for this model kit. Aside from the wheels, about the only thing that makes this a Foosified Impala is the really nice looking decals and some appointments on the interior.
For an older car, it still looks pretty nice.
I would have to agree with that, Newt. It was powerful, sleek, and great styling for 1965, and it's held up well over the ages. Here are the contents of the kit, and as you can see, there's quite a few parts to this one. There's even 2 sets of tires and wheels, of course, so you get your choice there. And plenty of customizing options here to really make this a standout looking car. Now we'll be using mostly liquid cement, sometimes super glue for fragile parts, and white or clear glue for the windows. And please remember to heed the manufacturer's safety and use guidelines when you're using any of the products that you see or hear in the review. Here are the decals for the kit, and the register is very good. The colors are nice. But those larger decals, the long stripes, and even the tire rings could benefit from these setting solutions available to help them conform to the contours of the body. Now construction starts with the motor, but just as a reminder, remember to scrape off any paint or chrome plating from mating surfaces that you're going to glue together for good adhesion. And as you can see, the transmission and the engine block are together here, so glue those together and then clean that up and then clean up the rest of the pieces needed for the engine, get them ready to assemble. And you've got some options here. You see the valve covers or the rocker covers there. They've got either customized chrome or the stock plain smooth ones that you'll paint. As you can see here, I painted the engine block Chevy orange and the transmission a gunmetal. Now the heads, the intake manifold, the water pump, and the carbs, they were all aluminum and then glued to the engine block. Now the starter was painted black with some brass appointments, and a Molotow chrome pen was used to accent that before being glued to the engine. The fuel pump was painted aluminum and chrome and was attached as well. Now for the air cleaner, you have a choice of either stock or custom, which is chromed, and I went with the custom for this build. I also decided to wire the distributor, and so I put that together with some 30 gauge wrapping wire and painted it tan and aluminum. The coil was also painted tan and yellow for a custom look. Now the rest of the engine pieces here were painted aluminum or black and some with gunmetal, as you can see. I found it simpler to assemble the whole belt assembly with the fan prior to attaching it to the engine, and I also gave the aluminum parts a black wash to accentuate the mounting bolts, etc. With all the pieces glued together and the wired distributor in place, as you can see, it's a pretty detailed and nice looking engine. Now we'll start working on the frame and the suspensions, But first we're going to put the steering box into place. As you can see, there's a little notch here indicated by the white arrow, and then you fit that right into the notch and glue it into position. To give the stance the Foosified appearance, you get an option here of a different kind of suspension which will lower the front end there to give it a little more of a rake. And so gather up these pieces here. They're required to assemble the front end, and as you can see, the tie rod assembly is all one piece, and it goes into position pretty nicely compared to the old versions. So the springs should be glued together and attached with the upper control arms using some slow setting glue there to get them aligned. Then add the tie rod and the cross member to the suspension, and as you can see here, this is what she should look like when you're finished with the front suspension. That will all be one piece then after it's glued together, and then you can attach that to the frame. Now we're going to position the chassis so that we can attach the front suspension there, as we mentioned, and get that glued into place. And as soon as that sets, we can paint the exhaust aluminum and steel for the pipes. And then I painted the rear upper control arms a gunmetal color. Next, you can assemble the rear spring halves. Those are two different halves for each spring, and glue those together. Then those get painted black with I use some silver dry brushing on the coils for these parts. And then I glued the rear differential halves together and painted the drive shaft steel and gunmetal for highlights. So here's our assembled rear suspension. You can see that the shocks or the coils there and shocks are just sitting on top of the rails, and it's a completed unit, and the rear spring assembly can be all set and dried before you paint it. And so once the front end is attached to the frame, the whole unit is just painted all at one time with the same color. And then you can add some detailing here. With the semi-gloss black background, we can add some red, blue, and aluminum appointments to give it a little something to help it stand out. Now look for the mounting points for the engine, and we're going to install that into place. And it's all complete, so just drop it on the motor mounts, line it up with the drive shaft, and then glue the exhaust ends to the exhaust manifolds there that are coming out of the engine. After painting the rear end assembly same color as the frame and letting that dry, we can drop that into position on the frame. Just make sure you scrape off any paint, and also note that the shock absorbers there have been painted a bright blue to give them a little color for this custom. There's a rear torsion bar that is painted gunmetal and aluminum, and then it's glued to the rear end and the frame, as you can see here in the larger picture. Now we can work on some interior parts. We're going to use these pieces for the seat, break off the sprue tabs and clean those up, and then glue the halves together and clean up the seams around the edges. Now you can see here there's some ejector pin marks there towards the lower end of the package shelf, and those will need to be cleaned up and filled and sanded off before painting later. So gather up all the parts now, the assembled seats and the chrome console, etc. And we're going to assemble all of those, and we're going to also do some treatment on the console. So those require some decals as well on the console. So decals number 6 and 7 for the center. And then I painted the shifter knob a pearl white to match the body. Once that's dry, we can assemble the whole thing. Of course, the interior buckets, they were finished off except, for the dash, and they were painted as semi-gloss with chrome trim. Now the rest of the interior parts are assembled, and they had been detailed, as you see, with some flat black and some semi-gloss black, and then aluminum and chrome pen for some accent. So the dash also gets painted as semi-gloss black, and the chrome pen is used for some of the trim on the dials, etc. And some aluminum areas on the dash as well. Now the kit has some decals for the dash, which makes detailing pretty easy. As you see those here, you can apply those. Now we'll work on the steering wheel and the column. They get painted black as well. And attaching the horn ring will set off that steering mechanism. After the decals and the paint were dry, I attached the pedals, the dash glass, and the steering wheel assembly to the dashboard. Assemble the brake booster, and that gets glued together in halves, so there will be a seam for you to clean up there. Now it gets painted aluminum and brass and then set aside to dry. Now locate the firewall, and that gets painted pearl white and then detailed with some paint and some 30 gauge wire to give it a little life. And then the air conditioner condenser housing gets painted black and glued to the firewall along with the brake booster assembly we did earlier. Then the firewall and the completed dash are glued into the interior bucket in the places provided for those. Now we can work on the body, and that was just cleaned up with some light parting lines, sanded off and smoothed off. And then it was a light coat of primer followed by some pearl white paint and a couple of coats of that, and let that set aside to dry. Then, as you see here, I turned it over and painted the upper half of the interior black to match the interior bucket. Now the dome light then gets painted white and glued onto the inside of the roof, and then the taillights were glued into their holes in the back of the body. I'll carefully remove the sprue attachments from the windshields and the windows here, and there's a place there, as you see the circle, for you to glue the mirror into position, so you can put that in before you actually install the windows. But then there's also some detailing around the windows, and you can do that. It's just a flat black trim around there, and then a Molotow chrome pen can add the accents. Then the clear windows get installed with some white glue or some crystal clear cement. Get out these parts, the radiator support, battery, etc. And the support's painted pearl white and aluminum and then detailed with some black Panaline accent. Now I painted the washer fluid reservoir with some clear blue and a cap. The cap was painted black. And I also painted the battery black and added the decal that comes with the kit. I also added a small piece of red wire to simulate the battery cable and detailed the battery with some chrome pen and yellow paint for the caps. Now the radiator hoses will be painted flat black and have some aluminum appointments on them, and the striker plate was painted steel. The radiator then is attached to the radiator support assembly, and the entire unit gets glued to the frame before attaching the hoses and the striker plate to the engine, etc. Now again, you get to choose between the Foose version customs and the stock version kits tires, and the Foose tires are wider and they have a lower profile, as you can see. As we mentioned, there's a choice to make between the custom Foose tires and wheels and the stock ones. You can see the stock ones on the right here, and there's also separate wheel backs for each style. Now you'll also find there are some included decals for the brake rotors and pinstripe decals for the Foose wheels. So it's a little tricky to get the wheel stripe and decals cut out in one piece, but you'll have to follow them around with a hobby knife, etc. Now assemble the wheels according to the style you've chosen, and you can rub the tread area with some sandpaper or just a sanding stick to give it a little more realism. But these are great looking wheels, and just pop those onto the axle stubs and they are all done. Now it becomes easy to attach the interior bucket to the chassis. Just to scrape off some of the area there where it needs to be glued. Look for those locating points, and then we're going to slip the chassis into the body, and that you just wiggle it in. Start with the back wheels and angle it in, and make sure that you spread the body just enough to get those wheels into position. The turn signal lights are painted with some transparent orange, and there's also a set of decals included for this if you want to use them, but I found it easier to glue the lights into the grille before attaching the front bumper as well. paint the recesses of the grill with some black wash. Essentially, that's 50-50 mix of paint and thinner. And the headlights get glued into the grill using some white glue at this point. And now scrape any chrome from the contact points and glue the grill into position in the body. And also you can add the SS decal there in the near the right headlights. Now working on the back end, I painted the that thin strip on the rear bumper there a flat black. That's and then applied the SS decal there below the taillights on the right side. Then I glued the whole thing to the rear of the body, making sure to remove any chrome from the application points. Next we'll attach the hood hinges to the hood there at the back of it, and then paint the unit pearl white. And there's some insulation inserts that get painted flat black there on the underside of the hood too. So now we can add the rest of the decals. There's a script decal here, and then on the side towards the front of the end there's the flag's symbol and these beautiful stripes, which are going to take plenty of warm water to put into position. Just make sure that your surface is wet when you start putting those down, and then smooth those out with a cotton swab or something to get out any air bubbles, and make sure they stay straight. And if you get a wiggle in them, wet her down again and move it until it's right exactly into place. Now the kit comes with a set of side view mirrors, but the old sport mirrors, but I left those off to preserve the sleek look of the Foose Custom. Out the doors here, as you see, and the door handles, and detail the wipers with some flat black for the rubber part. Then go ahead and glue the rest of the pieces on with a little dab of super glue. Here are the parts that you'll have left over from the kit. Most of them are just for the stock version, and then the mirrors that I elected not to use. So you can just put those in your stash. Well, there you have it. Your model is complete. And this sleek looking beauty will look proudly on your shelf, and it harkens back to the day when styling and comfort were important. It also had a very, very smooth ride. It was a pretty heavy car, but it's also had the Foose touch applied to it here with some real nice looking custom appointments. So if I were you, I'd buy one and put it on my shelf. Well, we hope you like this premium scale kit model review, and so that you don't miss any more, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can do that by clicking on the icon on the lower right of any of our reviews, and you could find us on Facebook or our website, rightonreplicas.com. Thanks.